The year was 2025, and the invisible fault line beneath the global economy was widening. The yield curve, that deceptively simple graph, was no longer just a warning in the shadows. It had become the unmistakable harbinger of a looming crisis. Evelyn Park sat in her dimly lit office, the glow from her monitor casting sharp shadows on her face. Every update from the market was worse than the last. Corporate bonds were faltering. The debt that had once seemed like a harmless promise now looked like a ticking time bomb. "Evelyn," her colleague Mark said, pointing to the screen, "look at this. The spreads on junk bonds are spiking. Investors are fleeing to safety faster than during the 2008 crash." She nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. And it's not just junk. Even investment-grade bonds are showing stress. The market's starting to price in default risks we haven't seen in years in Washington. The Federal Reserve was under intense scrutiny. Central bankers met behind closed doors, their faces grim, voices hushed but tense. Governor Helen Carter, a veteran economist with decades of experience, addressed the room. The data confirms the yield curve inversion is persisting. We're seeing early signs of tightening credit conditions. If we don't act carefully, we risk tipping the economy into recession. A younger board member, Robert Fields, leaned forward. "But if we cut rates now, inflation could spiral out of control. We've fought hard to bring it down." Helen's gaze hardened. "I'm well aware, but the real question is, which risk do we take? A prolonged recession or uncontrollable inflation? Either choice has consequences." Halfway across the Atlantic, Mark Duval faced his own crucible. The European economy, already fragile from supply chain disruptions and political tensions, was showing clear signs of strain. Unemployment figures ticked upward, consumer spending slowed, and confidence waned. In the halls of the European Central Bank, a heated debate unfolded. "Stimulus is necessary," one official insisted. "Without it, millions will suffer. But stimulus will only deepen debt problems," countered another. "We risk a sovereign debt crisis if borrowing balloons." Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. The yield curve was a global signal now, a warning echoed from New York to Frankfurt to Tokyo. Meanwhile, in Ohio, James Hernandez was grappling with a very different crisis. The plant closure was just the beginning. "Things are getting worse," Maria said, worry creasing her brow as they reviewed bills under the harsh kitchen light. James had taken odd jobs to keep the family afloat, but the strain was evident. "I'm doing all I can," he said, voice tight. "But the economy isn't making it easy." David sat quietly nearby, scrolling job listings on his phone. Every rejection felt like another blow. "There has to be something," he muttered, the optimism of youth slowly eroding. Back on Wall Street, Evelyn's firm began bracing for impact. Hedge funds started liquidating risky assets. Banks tightened lending standards. The market's pulse was erratic, small shocks sending ripples that grew into waves. "Liquidity is drying up," Mark warned. "If this continues, credit markets could freeze." Evelyn knew this was the point where a crisis turned real, when credit, the lifeblood of modern economies, seized up. In Washington, pressure mounted on the Fed. Politicians demanded action. Headlines screamed for decisive leadership. At a tense press conference, Fed Chair Daniel Reynolds faced reporters. "We are monitoring the yield curve closely," he said carefully. "Our goal remains to foster sustainable growth and stable prices. We will adjust policies as needed." But behind the public facade, uncertainty reigned. The delicate balance between raising rates to fight inflation and cutting them to avoid recession felt like walking a financial tightrope over a chasm. In Brussels, Mark Duval received troubling news. Several European banks reported increasing non-performing loans. Governments scrambled to reassure citizens, but fear crept in. A colleague whispered, "We could be on the verge of a banking crisis." Mark swallowed hard. The lessons of 2008 were fresh and terrifying. "The situation is deteriorating," Mark said quietly, in a conference call with other central bankers. "We need coordinated global action or risk cascading failures." Meanwhile, the Hernandez family's world crumbled. David's job search remained fruitless, and James' temporary gigs dried up. The once bustling community around them now echoed with uncertainty. Maria's voice broke as she confided in a friend. "We're barely hanging on." The media, sensing panic, amplified every headline. "Markets in free fall. Global recession looms." Is this the next Great Depression? Public anxiety soared. Back in New York, Evelyn received an urgent call from the Treasury Department. "Evelyn, we need your expertise," said a senior official. "We're drafting an emergency bailout plan, but it's politically explosive." She paused. "How bad is it? It's worse than 2008, maybe worse than 1929. At the heart of the crisis, the yield curve told a brutal story. It wasn't just inverted, it had flattened at new lows. The spread between short and long-term rates had collapsed to levels that historically preceded the worst economic contractions. The bond market was screaming in a language only a few could truly hear: prepare for pain. In the financial district, Evelyn met with a veteran trader, Tom Redding, who had survived the dot-com bust and the financial crisis. "Back then, we knew what to expect," Tom said bitterly. "This time, it's different. The debt's higher. The global interconnectedness is worse. There's no safety net big enough." Evelyn felt the weight of his words. The crisis wasn't just financial, it was systemic. Governments raced to stabilize markets, emergency interest rate cuts, massive liquidity injections, and unprecedented coordination unfolded. But it was too little, too late. In Cleveland, James watched as foreclosure notices arrived in mailboxes. His community's hope was vanishing. At a food bank, Maria volunteered, her hands shaking, but her spirit unbroken. "We have to help each other," she told the crowd. David, once hopeful, now questioned everything. In the corridors of power, the world's leaders wrestled with a terrifying truth. No one could control the crisis. "The yield curve has warned us twice before," Mark Duval reflected during a closed-door meeting. "Each time we ignored it until the fallout was catastrophic. This time, the warning was clearer, louder, but the response slower." As the storm unleashed, stock markets plunged by thousands of points. Banks reported staggering losses. Unemployment soared to levels not seen in decades. The global economy was unraveling. Evelyn sat in her office, watching the numbers crash. Her phone buzzed incessantly with urgent calls. "Is there any hope?" her assistant asked. Evelyn looked out at the city's skyline, now shadowed by uncertainty. "The yield curve doesn't predict forever," she said quietly. "But when it warns, it's because something fundamental is broken." And in the quiet homes across the world, families like the Hernances' life became a struggle to survive. To find meaning amid chaos,